blind, have low vision, or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Cheryl Ferris, and for the next hour I'll be reading from current issues of the Lockport Union-Sun Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And we'll begin with an article from Tuesday, February 10th, Cabinet Tree Controversy. Lockport's state legislators have called on the New York Attorney General and the State Department of Labor to investigate Candlelight Cabinetry, whose employees were furloughed with scant notice last month and are saying they haven't been paid and can't access their benefits. On Monday, State Senator Robert Ort and Assemblyman Paul Bologna jointly sent letters to Attorney General Letitia James and Commissioner of Labor Roberta Reardon, asking for investigations of Candlelight Cabinetry's business practices. The letters follow news reports last week about the shuttering of the manufacturing facility at 24 Michigan Street, the furloughing of the majority of its 107 employees, and affected employees' claims that they can't access their earned pay and benefits. We heard from several employees who have not received paychecks for work they had performed prior to being furloughed. We also heard from employees who are missing funds in their company 401k. Furthermore, employees have told our offices that some health insurance benefits have been inactive since at least November 2025, despite employees paying for those benefits, the legislators wrote. This is deeply concerning, and we believe this requires further oversight from your office. Last week, several furloughed Candlelight Cabinetry employees said that furloughs were imposed in two waves, on January 22nd and January 29th. A spokesman for the State Department of Labor said last week that the department had not received a notice of closure from the business. Candlelight Cabinetry co-owner Andrew Olson has told various media outlets that the closure is temporary. In a February 6th email reply to the newspaper, asking about the plant's status and the reason for the shutdown, he stated, "This is very much temporary, and we should be working things out shortly." Olson and Candlelight Cabinetry Op Company LLC are being sued by at least 6 creditors, who together are seeking more than $6.5 million for loans taken in 2025, according to Buffalo Business First. Andrew and Samantha Olson acquired Candlelight Cabinetry in 2023. Andrew Olson is the managing partner of Cotton Bay Corporation, a holding company that acquired Indiana-based Haas Cabinets and North Carolina-based Valen Drawers in 2024. In Indiana, according to a filing posted at law.com, the original Haas Cabinet Company filed suit against Haas Cabinet OpCo and Cotton Bay Building Products on January 8th over non-payments of a restructured $1.6 million debt. And now from the opinion page, here's a guest view. Remote learning threatens equilibrium. Remote learning is a valuable innovation necessitated by COVID-19, one that academically saved our youth, while many could argue that it also impaired them socially. Platforms such as Google Classroom, which made remote learning possible, while groundbreaking and requisite, have changed the culture of compulsory education in a way that disturbs us. In an office setting, should an employee become ill and require the use of their state-mandated sick leave, that employee is not sent home with the expectation that they lie in bed performing account reconciliations or shoring up budgets. At least they shouldn't be. No, employees are sent home with the understanding they get some much-needed rest so they can return to the workplace healthy and free from illness. Why are our children not given the same modicum of respect? In this post-COVID world, the ineptitudes we see from school administrators surrounding the issue of child illness are twofold. First, the overreaction. We have met our fair share of parents who send their children to school with fevers, chills, and clear contagions. Some of those parents are irresponsible. Some send their children to school because they cannot afford to take time off from work. Those children need to be sent home. But we have also met our fair share of students with the sniffles, those poor souls who, for 2 weeks in the spring, when the lilacs bloom, are as miserable as they come. Those kids need a Benadryl. What they do not need is for the school nurse to call their caregiver and demand they be taken out of school until they are seen by a physician, for fear that those swollen eyes are conjunctivitis and that cough is the Black Death. Do you know where healthy children get sick? In pediatric waiting rooms. We understand it can sometimes be difficult to discern which child to send home and which to leave be, but schools can do better than the overreaction of sending every child in America home for every ailment until proof can be provided that they carry no communicable diseases. Our second grievance, the grooming of our youth. Corporate giants rejoice. Hot off the presses, just waiting for exploitation, we have a generation of children who believe sick days are work-from-home days. That's right. Who needs a vacation? Who needs a mental health day? Who needs an actual sick day? Not you. You have the flu? We are sorry to hear that. You rest up now, but be sure that strategic plan is in my inbox by 9 a.m. tomorrow, will you? What are we teaching our children by sending them home from school sick with a backpack full of textbooks and a list of assignments in a Google Classroom? We are certainly not teaching them to set healthy boundaries for themselves. There is absolutely no need for this sick indoctrination of unhealthy work-life balance. Most, if not all, students have ample time to make up missed assignments during tutorial periods and study halls without forcing them to work when they should be sleeping off a fever. We urge administrators to take a careful look at policy and consider the lessons we are really burning into these young minds. And that's from the Daily Star in Oneonta. And here's a commentary by Bill Ketter, Consent of the People at Stake. With the popularity pendulum swinging back on President Donald Trump, he is ratcheting up his resolute pursuit of sowing public mistrust in our elections, past and future. Chasing the dubious premise that voting in America is fraught with fraud, except when he wins, the president is displaying the traits of a bull in a china shop to prove his conspiracy instincts. Insistent, without evidence, that he won the 2020 general election, he lost. The pliant FBI recently seized 5-year-old ballots and other election materials from Fulton County, Georgia, with a search warrant affidavit alleging probable criminal conduct. This astonishing fishing mission involved Georgia's most populous county, much of Atlanta, that helped reject Trump in the state he infamously pressured Republican election officials to find him enough votes to declare victory. Post-election recounts by machine and then by hand counting confirmed Trump lost Georgia to Joe Biden by 11,000 verified votes. That fateful loss fueled Trump's attack on the nation's election system with unproven claims of corruption and the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot by his supporters. The FBI's grab of ballots, voter rolls, and voting machine tapes blindsided county and state election officials who certified the 2020 results. They lacked specifics of the affidavit accusations, where the 700 boxes of election records ended up, or how the investigative process would unfold. The FBI swoop naturally raises suspicion and mistrust. A week before the Fulton County foray, the president prejudged the outcome when he told world leaders at Davos, Switzerland, he lost a rigged 2020 election and that people will soon be prosecuted for what they did. A contentious legal battle is sure to ensue. Fulton County has filed a federal court motion demanding return of the election documents. Democrats consider it more Trump retribution and distraction, leading up to the crucial House and Senate midterm elections in November. It is more than that. Trump wants to extend his legacy far into the future with voter suppression of liberals, especially leftist Democrats. He has stated publicly They are the enemy, and he hates his enemies. His game plan is obvious: change voting rights laws under the guise of reform by executive order. Key elements include documented proof of citizenship, birth certificate, passport, naturalization papers to register to vote, strict limits for mail-in ballots, curtail voting machines, and demand states submit their voter lists, which contain sensitive private information, to the Department of Justice for review. Those changes and others are under court challenge based on arguments the Constitution constrains the president's power to set election rules. That responsibility rests with Congress and the states unless the Supreme Court rules otherwise. But legal roadblocks haven't stopped Trump. On February 2nd, he unveiled a purely partisan idea that Republicans take over federal elections in liberal voting locations he considers rampant with fraud. We should take over the voting in at least 15 places, he said. The Republicans ought to nationalize the voting. The statements were made on a podcast hosted by his former deputy FBI director, Dan Bongino. Trump didn't back off later when GOP leaders in Congress expressed concern about stripping away states' rights. If the courts or the voters don't rise up against Trump's ideological contortions of voting rights, there's a reason to believe he will achieve his undisguised goal of remaking the federal government in his authoritarian image over the long haul. And the 250-year-old Declaration of Independence's consent of the governed will surely wither. And now from the February 11th issue, Clean Bill of Health. Niagara County remains measles-free, according to Dr. Fauzia Khan, Public Health Director, while 89 cases have occurred in Canada during 2026. Measles incidence rates remain closely monitored by public health organizations nationwide after the highly contagious illness logged more cases last year, totaling 2,144, than in the past 3 decades, according to the Association of State and Territorial Health Officials. The increase in measles has been a serious reversal for health officials after the disease was declared eliminated from the Americas in 2016 by the Pan American Health Organization. In November, the PAHO declared the U.S. and Canada has lost measles elimination status after transmission persisted within borders. According to the Federal Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, measles is so contagious that if one person has it, up to 9 out of 10 people nearby will become infected if they are not protected. Khan said Niagara County has a vaccination rate of 89% for the measles, mumps, and rubella immunization, while the state's rate is at 81%. Local pharmacies continue to offer the vaccination. Symptoms of measles appear 7 to 14 days after contact with the virus, the CDC said, and include a fever that may reach more than 104 degrees Fahrenheit, cough, runny nose, red, watery eyes, and a rash of flat red spots that appear on the face at the hairline and spread downward to the neck, trunk, arms, legs, and feet. Measles can cause serious health complications, especially in children younger than 5 years of age. Common complications are ear infections and diarrhea. Serious complications include pneumonia and encephalitis, the CDC said. Last week, the CDC confirmed 733 measles cases nationwide, including in Arizona, California, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Kentucky, Minnesota, Nebraska, North Carolina, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, Oregon, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, South Dakota, Utah, Virginia, Washington, and Wisconsin. A total of 6 measles cases were reported among international visitors to the United States. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Lockport Union-Sun Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And now, from the opinion page, Guest View. Turning Point USA's intent was division. Intent. That was the word that circled our minds in a seemingly endless loop on Sunday. What was the intent behind Turning Point USA's decision to host a dueling, whitewashed halftime show? What was the intent of the performers who agreed to participate in that endeavor? Your friends and neighbors who, the moment Benito Antonio Martinez Ocasio, known professionally as Bad Bunny, stepped onto the field in Santa Clara, changed the channel. What was their intent? How dark have our days become when our country is ripped apart by something as trivial as 13 minutes of a brown-skinned, 6-time Grammy-winning U.S. citizen having the audacity to sing in Spanish during a football halftime show? How dare he? The intent, as we see it, is clear. This is racism. This is transphobia. This is an organization and its followers cringing in disgust at the thought of a brown-skinned LGBTQ ally singing in Spanish on the mainland. This is about some morbid sense of nationalism that views Puerto Ricans as fake Americans. This is disgusting. For argument's sake, let us pretend this isn't about the color of Bad Bunny's skin or the fact that while he is a U.S. citizen, he was born outside of the continental U.S. If that narrative were true, the message from Turning Point USA's opening act, Brantley Gilbert, sent shrapnel through it by opening with Real American, perhaps insinuating Bad Bunny is something other than just that. Excellent choice of opener, TPUSA. Let's pretend this is about wholesome Christian values. Promoters made clear the event was for people who love football, love America, love good music, and love Jesus. It is possible that some viewers changed the channel under the assumption they would have the opportunity for prayer, mixing their love of football with their love for Jesus Christ. There was no prayer. There was a tribute to Charlie Kirk, but there was no tribute to Christ. It was less about people who loved Jesus and more about people who loved Charlie Kirk. Regardless, any arguments relating to the event being tailored for the more religious and wholesome lost traction before the show ever started. The moment Kid Rock, real name Robert James Ritchie, was booked as a headliner, the religious right should have protested the decision. They should have boycotted the show as a matter of principle. We aren't the police. Music is art. It's a form of expression. That expression should be unique. Musicians can't all be expected to paint the same picture on the same canvas. Arts of all media need to take risks and should be given the space and liberty to do so. We are comfortable, however, drawing the lyrical line at pedophilia. Can we all agree that romanticizing your preference for sexually assaulting children is not art? Kid Rock, that question is not for you. We know exactly where you stand. Young ladies, I like them underage. See, some say that's statutory, but I say it's mandatory. Kid Rock, there's no such thing as an underage woman. They are called children. You like children. If it is the intent of the religious right to argue morality by boycotting Bad Bunny in favor of the deviant alternative, we would say they missed the mark. The only argument we could almost support in favor of watching the Turning Point USA halftime show instead of the NFL halftime show is for those who just don't like Latin or reggaeton music, those who honestly just prefer country music. We say almost because Kid Rock and Brantley Gilbert do not produce country music. Call it what they want to, but we will call it how we hear it. Lee Brice and Gabby Barrett are competent country music performers, and we can see their appeal. We question their intent by agreeing to participate in this event, of course, but we can see why some may want to see them. They aren't for us. To quote an author who goes only by J. Raymond, we like our America seasoned, spicy even. Why water it down? Why dull it? Make it flavorful. Make it robust. We sat on Monday morning, seeing comments on social media, no longer wondering the intent of many. Posts and comments that read, "Why doesn't he speak English?" tell us everything we need to know. Benito Antonio Martinez Ocasio is a natural-born bilingual U.S. citizen born in Puerto Rico. He put on a colorful, lively, and entertaining performance that ended with a beautiful display of unity, broadcast to millions of people who loathe him because he produces more melanin than some of us do. He bleeds the same color we do. He loves Puerto Rico, and he loves America. We know this because he told the world he does. Do you know why he didn't sing in English? Because he doesn't have to. And that's from the Daily Star in Oneonta. And now from the Thursday, February 12th edition, To the Rescue. Newfane community rallies around Roger and Karen Taylor after house fire. A Newfane family known for their generosity and helping hands is now the focus of the community's care after losing their home to a fire on Monday. Roger and Karen Taylor of 6124 East Avenue were helped to safety by the Miller Hose Company as a garage fire spread to their nearby house. The Niagara County Sheriff's Office stated in a release that the structures are likely to be a total loss. "It's devastating," said Darcy Miller, the Taylor's daughter. "My dad is taking it better than my mom. She gets very weepy. Who wants to start over again at 79 years old? My dad likes to make jokes and pretend it's funny. It's his coping mechanism. I grew up in that home. There's so many memories in that home. I just couldn't imagine losing everything I've had. Losing my childhood home and seeing it as it is right now is devastating as well. I just couldn't imagine what would have happened to her," Miller said tearfully of her mother, who needs assistance walking. "Miller Hose, I am forever in debt to them. They have taken care of my family before. They're thinking that it was an electrical short. They heard a pop and something must have tripped, but we don't know that for sure." Miller said her parents and their dog are staying at a family member's home in the area. They were able to move their cars out of harm's way as the fire broke out, Miller said. "People have been dropping money off to help," she said. "Wherever we go, people are just there saying, 'Whatever you need.' The community has just opened their arms and are willing to help my parents as much as possible." Roger Taylor worked in the town of Newfane's streets department. Karen Taylor was a trusted babysitter who was the go-to person when someone needed a cake or a wedding, baby shower, or birthday, Miller said. A cake for a wedding. Joe Kafora, owner of Kafora's Pizza and Pasteria in Newfane, is helping organize a benefit on April 25th at Olcott Fire Hall for the family he describes as always giving. He said many of the details are to be determined, but the event will include a pasta and meatball dinner and a basket raffle. Roger is a huge part of this community, Kafora said. He comes and plows our parking lot and fixes our restaurant equipment. He's an extremely handy guy around town. He had a pop machine outside his house for kids to buy pop. All the kids who were riding their bikes would go to his house. He was always outside working on something. Kafora said he contacted Taylor when his brother-in-law needed a riding lawnmower. Roger had 6 mowers that he had fixed. He said, "Pick one out." He gave it to me for my brother-in-law to give as a housewarming gift. He's just super giving, and even now it's like twisting his arm to let people give him anything. You'd go to his house and he'd be happy to fix your stuff for free. It's been overwhelming because everybody wants to help. It's a beautiful thing because it's brought the whole entire town together. They've got so much clothes, they had me put out that they don't need more. Kafora's letting us eat for free, Miller said. Gift cards are helpful. Right now, people are asking, what do we need? We can't get into the house yet to go through things. I'm going to say there's probably absolutely nothing savable, except what might be in the basement. The thoughts and the prayers are what's needed. It's been amazing watching this community come around to my family. I don't live here, so I don't see it. I used to come up here and just name drop my dad, and people would say, I know who you are. To see it come back tenfold is just amazing. Kafora's encourages anyone who wants to volunteer at the benefit or donate items to call or message the restaurant at 716-778-8500 with their contact information. And here from Guest View on the opinion page, the swamp is the winner of Trump's tariff war. For decades, politicians have sold tariffs as a tonic for the working class. In reality, one particular group seems to benefit more than any other from trade wars. Washington influence peddlers. The United States collected some $288.5 billion in tariff revenue last year, up from $98.3 billion in 2024, thanks to a barrage of new levies imposed by the Trump administration. These tariffs, designed by elite lawyers in D.C. and implemented with highly technical and specialized language, presented a unique opportunity for lobbyists to charge large corporations exorbitant rates to seek relief and other carve-outs. And they did very well for themselves. The 20 largest lobbying firms reported $824 million in revenue last year, up from $595 million during the final year of the Biden administration. In the fourth quarter of 2025, lobbying contracts that mentioned tariffs were worth $10.6 million, up from $1.8 million a year earlier, according to the Advancing American Freedom Foundation. No wonder the plaintiffs in the Supreme Court case challenging President Donald Trump's tariffs are small businesses, not large ones. Big companies can afford to hire attorneys to understand the complex rules and lobbyists to try to minimize the pain. Small businesses get stuck with enormous tax bills. While lobbyists cashed in, Americans felt the pain. Poorer people tend to spend more of their income on goods that are subject to tariffs than higher earners. Tariffs redistribute corporate profits from less politically connected industries to more politically connected industries, not from the rich to the poor. Sometimes the tariffs are sold as a national security imperative, but that hasn't been the case over the past year. Taxing imports from Canada is not a way to reduce drug overdoses. Imposing tariffs on countries that already eliminated their trade barriers doesn't help to eliminate trade barriers. Defenders of import taxes sometimes argue that lobbying is unfortunate but worthwhile, given all the jobs that are saved or protected. Yet the government bailed out farmers because they were harmed by tariffs, and the number of total manufacturing jobs has fallen by 72,000 since last April. Car sales are down, and there are 19,000 fewer car manufacturing jobs in the country. All this is why 6 in 10 Americans oppose Trump's tariffs, according to the latest polling, and approval for them has consistently lagged other parts of his agenda, even among Republican voters. The people's elected representatives in Congress wouldn't pass new tariffs, which is why the president is imposing them by executive order and claiming a non-existent emergency. Draining the swamp is hard, but tariffs are an unforced error that make an already difficult task impossible. And now from Exploring the Niagara Frontier, A Flower for All Seasons by Bob Confer. As we come out of this long, brutal winter, you'll look for the slightest signs of spring to get you through. You might keep your eyes to the skies for migrating birds, or you'll look to the ground for the first glimpse of plant life. When it comes to the latter, one of the very first flowers to grace our presence every year is a plant that is otherwise taken for granted or looked at with disdain by gardeners as a weed, the purple dead nettle. The purple dead nettle is not actually a nettle. It is a member of the mint family. It has the telltale characteristic of mints, which is a square stem. It lacks, though, the fragrance that most people expect from mints. It gets the name dead nettle because the mint has numerous small hairs like nettles, but unlike nettles, they won't stick in your skin and make you itch like mad, so it was considered dead by early taxonomists. The plant is incredibly common and can be found almost anywhere disturbed by mankind: fields, edges of parking lots, sidewalks, roadsides, lawns, and so on. It is a small plant, most often 2 to 3 inches off the ground, and rarely reaching 8 inches in height. It is found in congested clumps, almost like ivies, with many plants in a very small area. The tiny tubular flowers, which look like minute snapdragons, are bright purple, maybe pink. The leaves are shaped like a heart or an arrowhead. The leaves start out green but can quickly become a dark red or deep purple in color and will stay that way for weeks or months. You may see them overtaking a wheat or hay field, making a sea of purple. Purple dead nettles are unique in that they have flowers most of the year. In a mild winter, you will see their flowers as early as the last week of February. Most years, though, you'll start to see them the second week of March. Their greatest abundance will be in April and May. The flowers tend to disappear from the heat in July and August, but you will see them again in the fall, right into November. Because of their early blooms, they are critical to the well-being of bees and other pollinators that come out of their winter slumber on warm days. Purple dead nettles are truly life-sustaining for bees, which have seen mass die-offs in recent years. Every little bit helps. When no other flowers are available in March, the purple dead nettle gives them the nectar they need. Then in April, the flowers give bees pollen. Like most mints, the purple dead nettle has value to people. While you probably wouldn't make tea out of it, its young, tender leaves nicely augment salads and stir-fries. The leaves also make a healthy addition to smoothies, adding a lot of powerful antioxidants to the mix. While most people might look down upon this plant as a weed, you should welcome its presence in your backyard. Its cute little flowers are a welcome sight when the snow starts to melt and the cabin fever has run rampant. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Lockport Union-Sun Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And now we turn to the February 13th edition. Taking It Easy, Eagles Tribute Band to land at Keenan Center March 7th. Desperados can come to their senses on March 7th when the Eagles Tribute Band Tequila Sunrise stirs up fans at the Keenan Center's Taylor Theater. The band's 7 p.m. show will feature several musicians from the Buffalo Music Hall of Fame. Kevin Leary, Arts and Culture Program Manager for the Keenan Center, said when looking at what the theater had offered, what we seemed to be missing were the cover bands. When it comes to covers you want to have in your venue, the Eagles jumped right to the top of the list. We think it's one that Lockportians are going to enjoy. Frontman Scott Solani said forming Tequila Sunrise was his wife's fault. We went to see the Eagles a few years ago, and it was packed to the rafters, Solani said. She looked around and said, I think you need to form an Eagles band. The tribute band thing in general has really taken off in the last 4 or 5 years. Some of those band members are no longer alive, and if they're still around, the tickets are really outrageous. The band's 6 members had played together for years before forming Tequila Sunrise. Dick Bowerly and Mike Runo play lead guitars. Gary Stinn plays keyboard and guitar. Steve Truzzi plays bass, with Cave Wilson on the drums. Solani said everyone sings with the exception of Wilson. The Buffalo-based band has played in Ohio and across western New York and the Southern Tier and heads to Syracuse soon. We've had as many as 1,000 people at our shows, Solani said. We've had some great crowds. I'm just very fortunate to be surrounded by very talented players. They make me sound better. This is legendary music, and we're happy to honor it and glad people are enjoying it. Solani said one audience member told him, you took all of us back to a certain time in our lives. Fan favorites include Life in the Fast Lane, Take It Easy, one of these nights, and Joe Walsh songs, he said. I'm singing the Glenn Frey songs and the Don Henley songs, Solani said, and we do some Joe Walsh from his solo career. We also do some songs from the extended Eagles family. There's a band called Poco, and we play a Jackson Browne series. The band doesn't try to dress the part of each famous Eagles musician. The Eagles didn't really have a look, Solani said. They really weren't known for a big elaborate stage show. It's less about the visual presentation than the music. You've got to have the vocals. They're known for their beautiful harmonies. And now we continue with a health danger or a scam. Scientific studies, Trump, come to different conclusions on climate change. The Trump administration on Thursday revoked a scientific finding that climate change is a danger to public health, an idea that President Donald Trump called a scam. but repeated scientific studies say it's a documented and quantifiable harm. Again and again, research has found increasing disease and deaths, thousands every year, in a warming world. The Environmental Protection Agency finding in 2009, under the Obama administration, has been the legal underpinning of nearly all regulations fighting global warming. It boggles the mind that the administration is rescinding the endangerment finding. It's akin to insisting that the world is flat or denying that gravity is a thing, said Dr. Howard Frumpkin, a physician and professor emeritus of public health at the University of Washington. Thousands of scientific studies have looked at climate change and its effects on human beings, on human health, in the past 5 years, and they predominantly show climate change is increasingly dangerous to people. Many conclude that in the United States, thousands of people have died and even more were sickened because of climate change in the past few decades. For example, a study on trends in heat-related deaths in the U.S., 1999 to 2023, in the prestigious JAMA Journal, shows the yearly heat-related death count and rate have more than doubled in the past quarter century, from 1,069 in 1999 to a record high 2,325 in 2023. A 2021 study in Nature Climate Change looked at 732 locations in 43 countries, including 210 in the United States, and determined that more than a third of heat deaths are due to human-caused climate change. That means more than 9,700 global deaths a year attributed to warming from the burning of coal, oil, and natural gas. A new study published this week found that 2.2% of summer deaths in Texas from 2010 to 2023 were heat-related, as climate change brings more frequent and intense heat to Texas. In the more than 15 years since the government first determined climate change to be a public health danger, there have been more than 29,000 peer-reviewed studies that looked at the intersection of climate and health, with more than 5,000 looking specifically at the United States, according to the National Library of Medicine's PubMed research database. More than 60% of those studies have been published in the past 5 years. Study after study documents that climate change endangers health. For one simple reason, it's true, said Frumpkin, a former director of the National Center for Environmental Health, appointed by President George W. Bush. In a Thursday event at the White House, Trump disagreed, saying, "It has nothing to do with public health. This is all a scam, a giant scam." Experts strongly disagree. Health risks are increasing because human-caused climate change is already upon us. Take the 2021 heat dome, for example, that killed more than 600 people in the Northwest, said Dr. Jonathan Patz, a physician who directs the Center for Health, Energy, and Environmental Research at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. The new climate attribution studies show that that event was made 150-fold more likely due to climate change. Patz and Frumpkin both said the vast majority of peer-reviewed studies show health harms from climate change. Peer-reviewed studies are considered the gold standard of science because other experts pore over the data, evidence, and methods, requiring changes, questioning techniques, and conclusions. More than just heat and deaths. The various studies look at different parts of health. Some looked at deaths that wouldn't have happened without climate change. Others looked at illnesses and injuries that didn't kill people. Because researchers in different time periods, calculation methods, and specific aspects of health, the final numbers of their conclusions don't completely match. Studies also examine disparities among different peoples and locations. A growing field in the research are attribution studies that calculate what proportion of deaths or illness can be blamed on human-caused climate change by comparing real-world mortality and illnesses to what computer simulations show would happen in a world without a spike in greenhouse gases. Last year, an international team of researchers looked at past studies to try to come up with a yearly health cost of climate change. While many studies just look at heat deaths, this team tried to bring in a variety of types of climate change deaths: heat waves, extreme weather disasters such as 2017's Hurricane Harvey, wildfires, air pollution, diseases spread by mosquitoes such as malaria, and found hundreds of thousands of climate change deaths globally. And now from our view, Niagarans rise to the challenge for our own. You can learn a lot about the character of a community by watching how its residents respond to a tragedy. Two stories recently covered by the Niagara Gazette and the Lockport Union-Sun Journal highlight the point. They both involve family homes being destroyed by fire. The first came in January when Vietnam War veteran Robert Wynn lost most of his belongings and his beloved German Shepherd, Lady, as fire swept through his house on Whitcop Avenue in Niagara Falls. The second came just this week in Newfane, where Roger and Karen Taylor, known around town as two of the kindest people around, lost their East Avenue home to a blaze that started in their garage. We're pleased to report in both instances the community has stepped up to help out. Both stories, while tragic, remind us what we should never forget. Despite our political differences and often fierce disagreements on the issues of facing our nation and our world, we are, at our core, Americans, and still very capable of rising to the challenge to assist our neighbors when they need help. We want to thank all those who have donated money or come to the aid in other ways for Robert Wynn and for Mr. and Mrs. Taylor. We also want to encourage our readers to continue to support them as they attempt to rebuild an essential part of their lives. There's no replacing the memories or the feelings living a home for decades represent. But there can and must be a new chapter for anyone who suffered such a loss, and especially for these three individuals who, by most accounts, have served their country and community well. Mr. Wynn served in the U.S. Army during the Vietnam War. He was fortunate to be able to return home only to face a diagnosis of cancer, suspected to be related to his exposure to Agent Orange during the war. He had to be hospitalized for 5 days due to smoke inhalation that gutted his house and claimed the life of his dog. His daughter, Marisa, stated the obvious when she said her dad's been through unimaginable hardships in his life. For her dad, she said, losing his faithful canine companion, Lady, hurt the most. That's the hardest part for sure, absolutely, Marisa said. You can replace things. He can get a new couch. He can get a new stereo. He can get a new place to live. But the dog, which was his best friend, so it's tough. A GoFundMe set up by Marisa to help her dad rebuild help has so far raised more than $7,000. You can help by making a donation at https://www.gofundme.com. Help Robert Vietnam veteran after house fire. Fire destroyed the Taylors' home on Monday. Firefighters from Miller Hose Company were able to help the elderly couple to safety before the flames consumed their garage and later their house. Roger, who worked in the town highway department and is known as Mr. Fix-It around town, and Karen, a trusted babysitter who has a reputation as a skilled cake maker, are known in Newfane as two of the nicest people around. They're thankful to be alive, but in need of support as they start the lengthy process of rebuilding. It's devastating, said Darcy Miller, the Taylor's daughter. My dad is taking it better than my mom. She gets very weepy. Who wants to start over again at 79 years old? My dad likes to make jokes and pretend it's funny. It's his coping mechanism. I grew up in that home. There's so many memories in that home. I just couldn't imagine losing everything I've had. We're happy to report the Taylor's neighbors, many of them anonymous donors, are stepping up to contribute to fundraising efforts for them. Kudos to John Kafora, owner of Kafora's Pizza and Pasteria, who is helping organize a benefit on April 25th at the Olcott Fire Hall for the family that he describes as always giving. He said many of the details are to be determined, but the event will include a pasta and meatball dinner and a basket raffle. Events like these are difficult to cover and hard to read about. They offer only one shining light, a reminder about one of the best things about Niagara County, the generous nature of the people who live here. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Lockport Union-Sun Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And we'll end with some readings from the February 14th to 15th paper. First, farewell, Mr. Lockport. Friends of Bob Ray remember an uncommonly kind man who lifted spirits everywhere. This week, Lockport lost one of the most widely loved members of our community, Bob Ray. Many knew him as the dapper man in the tuxedo who greeted us with that big smile at the door of the historic Palace Theater and who polished all the brass inside. Many knew him as the man who kept the flowers on Canal Street alive in spring and summer and who had the dream to make the gazebo there come alive with Christmas lights in winter. I knew Bob from 100 conversations we had over the years at Steamworks Coffee, the second home we shared. What is remarkable about Bob is that he was loved so widely, and yet we knew so little about him. That is who Bob Ray was in the life he lived here, a man always about others and never about himself. Bob was born on November 17, 1951. He was raised in a family of 9 brothers and sisters, served honorably in the U.S. Army and U.S. Coast Guard, and had a successful career as a purchasing agent in Boston and New York City. He later moved to Lockport to care for his sister, who was afflicted with Alzheimer's disease. But what people here knew about Bob was not his career or resume. What we knew was his extraordinary kindness to everyone. As I reached out to the community for remembrances of Bob, what struck me most was not just how many people he touched, but the depth with which he touched them. Even in his last days, Bob only thought of others. On Friday of last week, when he knew his illness was terminal, Bob traveled around town delivering flowers and saying his goodbyes to those he cared about, including leaving a beautiful bouquet for the staff of this newspaper. I can't think of any other death here that has sparked such widespread emotional reaction. Bob held no public office, wrote no columns in the newspaper, and held no position of leadership in any organization. He was a humble man who left an enormous mark on our community. His life is an example for all of us. Here are excerpts from some of the many expressions of affection and loss that people have shared. Rob Ray was one of my best friends here at the Spires where he lived. He really had a passion for making people feel welcome to our city. Bob would have that effect on you. You would stop everything to talk to him and see how he was, although he cared more how you were. I remember after I lost my service dog, Bob brought me an envelope of pictures he had taken of her. It brought me to tears. Reverend Dr. Chris Kester. Now, I remember the first day we met. He said he moved from Buffalo, never had any kids of his own, but showed me an article of him in the paper volunteering at the Children's Hospital. His heart would swell for the sick children. It wasn't for recognition or pats on the back, but rather it was his way of introducing himself to our community as a loving volunteer. He would save up his points from his daily large coffee with cream and cup of ice water and treat those he met, always giving back in every way he could. And that's from Ashley Bro's Steamworks Coffee. He was an awesome man who helped me through many winter mornings by getting me a coffee from Steamworks while I was homeless. He also brought me into his home, fed me dinner, and also helped brighten my days by just conversing with me. I will be forever grateful to this man for the help he gave me when no one else cared to. And that's from Deanna Mendenhall. He always made attending an event at the Palace feel like an elegant and special occasion. Tina Kowalski. We took our 8-year-old granddaughter, Lily, to see the Music Man, and Bob greeted us cheerfully at the door like so many other times before. However, this was the first time that Lily had ever met him. Without missing a beat, Bob gently bent over and asked her, "Are you one of the actors in the play?" Lily absolutely giggled with glee and humbly said no. I have never seen a child absolutely beam so incredibly the rest of that evening and even the next day. Daniel Furmanek. He would come to the Niagara Hotel every Bills game, had some good food, and talked with friends. He never missed one. Roxanne Swan. My first memories with Bob are of serving him ice cream at Lake Effect and seeing him planting flowers outside. We very quickly became friends. Eventually, he started working at the Palace Theater, and I started working there too. It seemed like everywhere I went, Bob was there with a hug and a smile ready for me. He showed me what community can do. Tessa Bonanno. When our daughter Piper was in the hospital a couple of years ago, Mr. Bob just got on a bus to Rochester and stayed by her side for days. She told the staff that he was her grandfather. He was like a grandfather to all of the girls, and we met him not soon after I lost my dad. Mr. Bob gave us all unconditional love. Tara Neal Gable. We met about 2 years ago, and from that moment on, I knew I had a very unique and genuine friendship with a man with the greatest love of community and family, Mayor John Lombardi III. I met Bob at 6:45 a.m. the first day I worked the market on Canal Street. It was clear he had been there much earlier that day watering the flowers. Every time I saw him, he was smiling, and the first thing he would ask was, "Can I help you in any way?" Later in the day, I would see him sitting at a picnic table talking to people, listening to the music. It was clear he was soaking up every moment. He did what he did because he loved his city. Grace Platt, Lockport, Main Street, Incorporated. Thank you, Bob, for who you have been here for so many. I will never pass that picnic bench in front of Steamworks without seeing you there. Onward. A memorial service is being held for Bob Ray at 11 a.m. on February 21st at St. John the Baptist Church, 168 Chestnut Street. After the service, friends of Bob will gather at Steamworks to share stories and raise a cup of coffee in his honor. And this story was by Jim Schultz. And from the opinion page, Red Tape is Strangling Rural Health Care by Sally Pipes. Rural America is running out of doctors. According to a recent report from the Commonwealth Fund, 43 million Americans now live in rural communities facing a shortage of primary care providers. This shortage isn't new. It's been reality for rural America for decades, and it helps explain why patients there experience higher rates of chronic illness and die sooner than their urban counterparts. At first glance, the problem seems simple: too few doctors and nurses. But if that's the case, why have so many states adopted regulations that restrict the supply of care? Our leaders need to scrap those regulations and simultaneously invest in efforts to train more healthcare providers locally. Consider scope of practice laws, which limit what kinds of care nurse practitioners and physician assistants can deliver to patients, and how they can do so. In states such as Texas, Oklahoma, and California, nurse practitioners must work under the supervision of another healthcare provider, generally a physician, for their entire career. Physician assistants must deal with similar restrictions. Many of these highly trained professionals could treat patients immediately in rural communities that desperately need them. Instead, they're sidelined by regulations that make it illegal for them to use the full extent of their education. Rolling back these rules would quickly expand access to care. Certificate of need laws are another barrier. These rules force would-be providers to convince state officials that a community needs a new clinic or facility before one can open. They also offer incumbent providers the chance to lobby against the entry of competitors. What incumbent wouldn't want the government to outlaw its competition? That's exactly what certificate of needs laws can enable, to the detriment of patients. In any other part of the economy, high prices and long waits are signals for entrepreneurs to enter the market. In healthcare, CON laws replace market signals with bureaucratic permission slips. Eliminating these laws would make it far easier for doctors and other clinicians to practice in underserved parts of the country. Of course, paring back rules and regulations can only do so much. Rural America also needs a more robust pipeline of physicians. Fortunately, there's evidence that doctors trained in rural settings often choose to stay. A recent study in the Journal of Graduate Medical Education found that residents who complete at least half their training in rural communities are 5 times more likely to end up practicing there. Philanthropy could help build that pipeline of rural medical talent. Americans donated just under $600 billion to charity in 2024. Steering even a small portion of that sum to things like rural residency programs could begin to narrow the rural physician gap and eventually deliver huge returns for public health. Rural America is in need of intensive care. Market forces can address that need if we let them. And now, here's a little bit from the Cheers and Jeers column. Cheer. Niagara Falls High School junior Dan O'Grady is being credited for his quick thinking in helping a fellow student in crisis recently. Dan and fellow Falls junior Aiden Hewitt were at lunch when Aiden began choking on some food. Dan said his instincts took over, and he rushed over and began performing the Heimlich maneuver. I was pushing hard on his stomach, and I just remember thinking, I hope I am doing this right. He apparently was doing it right, as Aiden began breathing again and was rushed to the nurse's office. As it turns out, Dan should also be credited for paying close attention to whatever medical drama he enjoys watching. He says he's never been trained on how to perform the Heimlich, but he had seen it happen on television. I just went on instinct. Pretty good instincts, we must say. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from current issues of the Lockport Union-Sun Journal. We read from the Lockport Union-Sun Journal every Saturday at 5 p.m. Your reader has been Cheryl Ferris. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have a reading of the Wall Street Journal Off-Duty section. At 7 o'clock, we got Harper's Magazine, and at 8 o'clock, we have Sports Illustrated. Stay tuned for these readings and more throughout the day. You're listening to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Radio readers broadcast daily readings 24 hours a day of newspapers, magazines, and books to area people who are blind or have a print disability who are provided reading radios. Our broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. Radio reading broadcasts throughout the city of Buffalo, western New York, and southern Ontario's Niagara Peninsula. For more information on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, call us at 716-821-5555. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print